They say war machines are an evil necessity, if at all you consider them evil. But for a big and huge country like India, a solid and a sturdy military is a must. By all means, India's military might has to be in a top-notch condition. There comes the question of our defense industry. Are we well equipped to match up with the military speed of other players? In the next half an hour, we attempt to highlight the need of privatization of defense industries in India and take a closer look at the tricky question of foreign direct investment in defense sector. Not many of us know that India's vast defense manufacturing spread includes 52 labs of research facilities and 9 public sector units exclusively dedicated to making arms, better known as defense PSUs. And speaking of production of bombs and shells, the country has 39 government-funded ordnance manufacturing units. But even all this is hardly enough. Put together, all of them do not meet requirements of well-equipped military force on air, sea and land. Remember, these forces are vital guards to our security and sovereignty, key hopes against the intruding army. But there is no denying that India's efforts to arm her soldiers with the best that money can buy have been lopsided at best. There is a heavy dependence on the overseas weapons market over quality indigenous manufacturing. Figures say a whopping 70% of our weapons are bought from international markets and only 30% are made in India. A grave situation indeed.
The gun will now fire 3 rounds in area diamond.
The massive imbalance was flagged way back in 1992 when Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, then scientific advisor to the Defence Minister and head of the Self-Reliance Committee, had suggested a series of steps to increase our domestic defence production. Dr. Kalam had suggested that indigenous production be raised to 70% of the total outlay by 2005. In simple terms, a target was set to increase indigenous weaponry to 70% so that only 30% could be imported. The longer term plan was India spend less on foreign exchange while strengthening its defences, literally speaking. The same argument was stretched to include limitless creative private participation in the defense sector. The idea was to get the best creative inputs and quality from the private sector to reinforce production lines in the defense public sector units. Herein arose an argument in favor of 100% FDI of foreign direct investment in the defense sector without compromising any inch of national security.
For a growing country like India and which a country which aspires to become a global power, so there is no other way than manufacturing. You can't claim a real power unless you have its own defense equipments.
But the ideas and proposals have changed nothing. In 2014, we still import 70% of all our weapons stockpile. This despite the fact that India manufactures top-of-the-line weapon systems like Sukhoi 30 fighters, BrahMos missiles, and Scorpion submarines. All these world-class machines are licensed products drafted by foreign hands. And in these important assembly lines, it is an open secret that critical parts remain imported till the very end of the program.
We will have to first learn to crawl, then to walk, and then to run. But instead, our strategy has been that let's start running right from the beginning. And that hasn't worked. That has been a failure for the last 50 years.
The contrast emerges stronger when the defense manufacturing sector is compared with the indigenous manufacture of automobiles. India has among the largest and finest automobile manufacturing plants in the world, reaping rich benefits from foreign direct investment in this sector. In contrast, the performance of defense PSUs has been dismal. Outside the G8 countries, India has among the largest defense production centers in the world. As per the latest count, there are 39 ordnance factories and 9 dedicated public sector units, churning out an array of arms and ammunitions for India's strategic needs. In addition, there are 50-odd defense R&D labs controlled by the Defense Research Development Organization, or the DRDO. India's defense industry manufactures a wide array of products, from small arms and ammunitions for fighter jets to aircraft carriers to submarines, radars and tanks. In 2010-11, government-owned defense industry produced armaments and equipment worth $10.5 billion. That's over 47,500 crore rupees. The Ordnance Factories Organization is considered the largest and the oldest departmentally run production enterprise in the country. The body dates back to British era, when the country's first arms factory, the then called Gun Carriage Agency, was established in 1801 at Kausipur in Calcutta. This factory still exists by the name of Gun and Shell Factory, Kolkata. Over the years, the number of such factories has grown. Their expansion gathered momentum post the Chinese aggression of 1962. But the process has slowed down. The lessons learned the hard way in that war led to the establishment of 16 new factories. Compare that to 5 factories set up in the 13 years between 1949 and 1962. Apart from 39 such units that are in operation, 2 more are currently being set up. The 40th unit is coming up at Nalanda in Bihar and the 41st as Korwa in Uttar Pradesh. Both will focus on production of new generation of carbines. State-run ordnance factories can be classified on the basis of 5 operating divisions based on the main product or technology produced. 10 other factories produce ammunitions and explosives. 10 ordnance factories focus on producing weapons, vehicles and equipment. 9 factories are involved in production of material and components. 5 factories are dedicated to the manufacturing of armored vehicles. And 5 others are engaged in producing a range of defense hardware. All 3 wings of the armed forces, the Army, Air Force and the Navy, are customers of these defense industrial units, accounting to 80 to 85% of their sales. The factories also export military hardware to 6 countries, including the US, Israel and Italy. Government-run ordnance factories employ some 1.5 million people. Way back in 1991, the Arjun Singh Committee on Defense Expenditure first pointed out the shortcomings and recommended that 5 of most troubled factories be shut down with immediate effect. The committee also suggested aggressive private participation in defense production in keeping with all parameters of national security.
Now, in my opinion, for our country to grow, for the manufacturing sector to grow, what matters is manufacturing should be in-house. And one of the best ways to do that in this country would be through the FDI route, which will not only bring capability, capacity, jobs, skill to this country, but also add to our national GDP.
And as a way forward step, the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Defence suggested to nominate leading defence players from the private sector as Raksha, Udyog, Ratnas, or the champions of the defence industry, thus giving them same status as defence PSUs and ordnance factories. 12 of such private players were shortlisted by the Ministry of Defence. Then suddenly one fine morning in the month of February 2010, Ministry of Defence scrapped the proposal. But this has not disheartened the leaders from the free world to participate in nation building. Many of them still say, regardless of their earlier setbacks, if given an opportunity and fresh air, there is still a huge scope for India-made private defence products, as many of them still employ thousands of people.
To the maximum possible, we should manufacture our own weapons and platforms, and where there is no economies of scale and where we have really our R&D capability is not up to the standard, we may import, but our efforts should be directed or geared towards manufacturing maximum arms and ammunition in-house. Defense production is very technology intensive. As of now, India doesn't have the required technology to manufacture advanced weapons and platforms. So by FDI, what we want is technology, not the money per se. Technology cannot come through FDI without increasing the FDI cap from present 26% to at least 49%, and I would argue for sensitive technology, India should allow up to 100% FDI.
Have a look at some big players. Bharat Electronics Limited, BEL. It started with military-grade transceivers. It now makes some 350 products. Bharat Earth Movers Limited, BEML. It started out producing railway rolling stock. Today, almost 32% of its product lines are dedicated to defence needs. And of course, the big daddy of defence industry in India, the Defence Research Development Organisation, or the DRDO. It holds the key mandate of designing and developing state-of-the-art weapon systems. For the Navy, Masgaon Dock Limited and Garden Reach Shipbuilders and Engineers produce warships and submarines. Statistics gathered from the Ministry of Commerce reflect comparatively low numbers of FDI in defence as compared to other sectors. Topping the FDI list between 2000 and 2014, the service sector has attracted about $39 million in FDI. The construction industry brought in over $23 million in FDI, with telecom sector attracting FDI worth over $13 million. In comparison, the defense sector ranks at a miserable 61st in the terms of FDI flow at just $4.94 million. This is behind even the sectors like earth-moving machinery, sugar, and mathematical and surveying instruments. The current capacity building layout for modernization of the armed forces and aerospace industry stands at 35,000 crore rupees a year, which suggests that domestic capability alone would not be able to meet the targeted acquisitions in the next 15 years or more. Hypothetically, this means we would require 2 more Masgaon Dock units, 3 additional units of Hindustan Aeronautics, and 4 to 6 new Bharat Electricals or Bharat Dynamic units. This means a fund of 50,000 crore rupees. The investment would have to be in place by 2015 to 2018 if the force level targets, as they are known as, to be met by Made in India resources. The logical answer, say technocrats and critics, is the foreign direct investment in the sector, but the question mark and fears remains. Perhaps the biggest is the security hazard that runs alongside the concern that India would be held to ransom to overseas equipment manufacturers. Opponents of FDI in defence say policies of the supplying country would stymie the indigenous growth and adversely affect India's own defence industry.
The purpose of FDI is very simple. It must build capability in the country in terms of developing the right HR resources so that our country can become a top-notch defense production company in the world. Second, it must build capacity. Instead of being able to make only 10 aircraft or some 3 boats at a time, we should be able to build hundreds of them. So we must build capability, we must build capacity, and for the industry, it must build business.
In 2010, the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Defence in its report suggested speedier implementation of public-private participation in defence production. Members of Parliament have been direct in their attack, reminding the Ministry of Defence that main plank of indigenization in defence production is to reach higher levels of self-reliance in development and production of state-of-the-art equipment and weapon systems. MPs have voiced their view that such an issue of national importance cannot be viewed through a mere commercial and statistical jargon. We take a short break, and when we come back, we take a closer look at the botched up plan to declare 12 private players in defence production as Raksha, Udyog, Ratnas and find out what went wrong. Welcome back after the break. We are looking into an elusive question of lack of private participation in defence industry in India. Almost 3 years back, Ministry of Defence overnight scrapped proposals to nominate 12 private players in defence production as Raksha, Udyog, Ratna. Over 200 letters of intent were issued by the government recently for private participation in defence production. It would translate into an investment of around 12,000 crore rupees, giving employment to about 40,000 people. Weaponry to be produced by private players include armoured and combat vehicles, radars, and electronic warfare equipment. There are 9 major private players, apart from smaller ones, who have entered into partnerships with foreign collaborators, producing a vast array of defence equipment. Names on this include Tata Group, Larsen & Toubro, Mahindras, Reliance Industries and Wipro.
What is really important is for the government, in our opinion, to set goals, transparent goals of how to attract private sector investment and options to the customer, because that is what really counts in, let us say, 10 to 20 different areas of defense production in the next 5 years. Well, given the nature of the industry, FDI is extremely critical, and I think as far as the Tata Group is concerned, we have already said that 49% is actually should be through the automatic route. More than that should also be allowed, depending upon the technology. But let's recognize that the FDI percentage is, as they say, only a necessary condition, not really a sufficient condition to get investment. Transparency of the other rules surrounding the FDI is also required. Otherwise, the percentage itself will again become a non-starter.
All this imported frontline weaponry comes with a hefty price tag. Take, for example, the Sukhois, the MiGs, and the Jaguars, and the big booming guns like the Bofors. And reality checks say almost no outright defense deal is clear of the black mark of scandal. Corruption in defense purchases has badly impacted modernization of the armed forces. Another recent move by the Defence Ministry to encourage India private players to participate was creation of categories for defence equipment. The categories were buy and make, buy would mean an outright purchase of equipment, this buy could be Indian or global. Indian would mean Indian vendors only, and the global would mean foreign as well as Indian. Also, buy must have a minimum 30% indigenous content. All the jargons has turned out to be confusing to the layman. What it means effectively though is that Defence Ministry has spoken up to the issue finally. By tweaking hard set regulation, there is a desire now to catch up with the world and in particularly the neighborhood.
Benefit of 100% FDI units would be that they would definitely, first of all, the unit would be in India. So you are protected against the possibility that you can be embargoed. Number two, by the fact that the unit is in India, what it will do is that it will it will generate ancillaries, because that person who is producing, let's say, an engine, he's not going to do, he can also see around him that there is a certain Indian industry with certain capacity, certain capability. So there will be, just as it has happened with Maruti, you see around Maruti, there are a whole lot of ancillary industries have grown.
It is also a fact that probably India is the only country in the world which, despite of having vast defence industrial base, still imports its key armaments include several low and high-tech items such as military transport vehicles. According to the latest figures available from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, India is the largest arms importer in the world with 9% of the global share. Change in the scene is must. The big question is, who should do it? In all fairness, it is too much to be expected from bureaucrats in Ministry of Defence to usher in revolutionary changes overnight. That job is best left to the politicians. This is Vineet Dikshit for Agenda 2014 on FDI in defence industry. Keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.